Jumping to the cut view, we are looking at a blank page, which is how every story begins, both the good ones and the bad ones. I'm hoping this will be a good one. This one is called Bless Your Heart by Jay Wilburn. That is the title at the top. And so we'll just dive right on in here. I have a few notes, including some names and kind of a premise that I've thought up in my head, but that's pretty much what I got. So, Bless Your Heart by Jay Wilburn. Let me tell you a story. Sally stared through the dirty front windows of the restaurant from where she leaned on the hostess station by the front door. The windows were clean on the inside, but there was no keeping the dirt off the outside. Something out there through all that film of dust was, let's say, fell from the sky on a few white bursts of fiery energy. The dull thumps from those engine burns shook the windows in their frames. All right. If you have time to lean. Alright, I don't need to use there, and I need to spell lean correctly. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. As we've all heard if we've worked for somebody who thinks they're clever in a restaurant or pretty much any other business. Aunt Servo said from behind her. Sally stood up straight with a grinding noise from her joints that probably shouldn't have been ignored. Deep indentions in the wood of the hostess stand showed where her forearms had rested. She didn't clean anything, but she watched the vessel land on the hard pan beyond the crumbling buildings. Alright, let me spell that right. I feel like I got a slow start today. My brain isn't working too well, so I appreciate your patience. She didn't clean anything, but she watched the vessel land on the hard pan beyond the crumbling buildings that surrounded the took a while, but something was moving out there where the ship had come to rest a while ago. More white hot objects burned up in the cloudy atmosphere on their way down around the city. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Sally straightened her back a little more, even though she wasn't leaning. Someone was coming. Sally, that should probably all be one paragraph, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it separate sentences. Sally lifted 2 menus from the slot beside her station. Well, let's make it 1 menu because right now she only thinks 1 person's coming. She lifted a menu from the slot beside her station. The plastic ripped loudly as she separated it from the others. The menu was bleached white on one side and covered in black distress on the other. It was 2 of them. They were both dressed similarly as they stood outside looking at the lit up sign for the restaurant. Sally hadn't been out there in years, but she knew it said, "Bless your heart. Come in and eat." All right, let me put quotations around all that. I'm going to use an exclamation point. She ripped free another illegible menu. Finally, one of the men stepped forward. The other reached out to grab his sleeve, but missed. The fellow opened the door to the ring of a bell. He was a black fellow and ducked his head from the sound. When he looked up, the bell sound strained a little at the end and distorted before it shut off. Bell above the door was decorative. Welcome to Bless Your Heart. Your heart, she said. How many in your party? The fellow recoiled at her voice and stood holding the door and letting in the clouds, letting in the drifts of dust on the hot wind. His white friend also in a wrinkled, shimmering suit, complete with gloves and boots, walked up behind him. What the hell is this, Tommy? He asked. First guy stepped through with his helmet off and under his arm. Who are you? Okay, hold on, I want that lowercase. I'm Sally. Sit anywhere you like. More dust blew in. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Aunt Servo called from deeper in the restaurant. Okay. The first guy, Tommy. All right. The second fellow still had his helmet attached to his suit, but golden visor was up. He pushed Tommy forward and closed the door behind them like Aunt Servo was scolding them. Randall. Tommy grunted as he shifted sideways. What, man? We were letting dust in. We don't know what this place is. You're at Bless Your Heart just in time for lunch. Aunt Servo extended her metal arms, sculpted to look like they had folded fat underneath. Follow me, Sally said. Her knee joints ground with grit as she walked them into the restaurant. Okay. Restaurant filled with white, say long white tables, tiled floors, and white shelves. Do you have food? Randall asked. Sally placed out the unreadable menus as if that answered the question. Randall took a seat by one of the menus. Tommy huffed and said, "Get up from there. We still need to find the others." We have the beacons on. This is as good a place. The beacons are on. I think I misspelled beacons. Hold on. Yep. The beacons are on. This is as good a place as any. How many words per minute do you type using only one finger? Well, right now I'm typing very slowly. I have no idea. I really don't. I've never actually calculated it, but once I'm on a roll, I can type pretty fast, I think. Right now I'm making up the story as I go, so I'm not going too fast. We only have the beacons on. This is as good a place to wait as any. Can I get you boys something to drink to start you off. Aunt Servo asked. Okay. Let me add something else up here. All right. Sally stepped up between them, between the men, and asked, "Are you waiting on a couple more?" Okay, we'll say Randall ignored her. There we go. All right. "Can I get you boys something to drink to start you off?" Aunt Servo asked. Tommy said, "We're not picking up their signals, so something went wrong. We need to go look. Now, get up." Randall didn't get up. He turned his eyes on Aunt Servo and asked, "What do you have to drink?" We're out of a lot of items, but we have filtered water, she said, and ice. Randall's eyes lit up. "I'll take an ice water." "We can't stay here," Tommy said. No, hold on. Let me have Aunt Servo do something. I know I'm jumping all over the place here. I'm sorry. All right. The bulky robot turned her attention on Tommy. "And you, sir?" "Okay, we can't stay here," Tommy said to Randall. Randall sighed and said, "2 ice waters, please." Aunt Servo turned and called out, "Cousin Cog." Another robot, this one wearing a stained apron, leaned, okay, I need to put a comma there, leaned out from the swing door, let's say a swing door, because I haven't introduced it yet, a swing door across the room. "What can I do you for?" "2 ice waters." "You got it. We we have very low radiation today. They'll taste great. He pulled back into the kitchen that showed for a second beyond that door. What did he say about radiation? Tommy asked. Aunt Servo waved the question off. He's a kidder. Don't listen to him. Do you boys know what you'd like to eat? We're not eating here. Tommy said. Help me look for the crew. All right. Randall stayed seated and folded his hands over the menu. What do you have to eat? Aunt Servo said, we're low on a few things. Aunt Servo said, we're low on a few things, but we can always rustle up some meat and potatoes. Randall said, we'll have 2 of those. Thank you. Coming right up. Aunt Servo headed for the kitchen. Cousin Cog stepped out with 2 glasses of ice water. She took those and they exchanged a few quiet words. Are you having some sort of breakdown, Randall? You're the one who seems to need to calm down, old buddy. Tommy placed his palms on the clean white wood of the tabletop next to Randall. Would it help if I slapped you across the face, maybe real hard. We're not going to find anyone running around like we've been doing. This spot has power and food, apparently. We need to stay calm. Aunt Servo placed the ice waters on the table. We'll have your meals rustled up real soon. Jeff is working the grill today. He's the best. As she scooted off, maybe to keep an eye on Jeff, the grill master. Okay. Tommy tried to grab Randall's wrist, causing a little water to spill down the front of his suit. Watch it, Tommy. This has ice in it. You're not going to really drink that, are you? Randall answered by taking a drink. He made a real show of giving a satisfied sigh. That really hits the spot. Try yours. Did you hear them mention radiation? You see what it looks like out there. They said it was low radiation. They said it was no radiation. Or maybe they said low. Either way. They are relics of a fallen civilization. We need to follow protocol, Randall. Randall took another sip and waved Tommy off in a very Aunt Servo sort of gesture. All right. If there was radiation still, our sensors would have picked it up. Well, Randall, not all the beacons are working, so maybe those sensors are missing something too. We have to eat and drink something, Tommy. We have to eat and drink something, Tommy. All right, I know I got an argument going between these two, but that's all right. We have supplies. Limited supplies that we shouldn't use up. Do you care about finding the others? Are you just giving up? Is that it? We need to regroup and think things through. We have no signal on anyone else. We can see the ship from here, and I think this place is air conditioned. Randall turned to Sally. Is it air conditioned in here? Sally jolted as if being awoken from a daydream. She stood up straighter and pointed at the ceiling. Probably just the fans you were feeling. Okay, let me get the Y on the end of Sally there. All right. Tommy stared at her, then asked, "How long have you been here?" The restaurant was got letters in all the wrong places. The restaurant was established in... Okay, come on now. The restaurant was established in 2234. I've been here since then. Randall glanced at Tommy, who seemed to be watching the sweat of condensation run off the side of the glasses. said, that's about 500 years or so. Right, Tommy? What happened to everyone? Tommy asked. Sally stood for a moment, jolted again, and answered, You're our first customers for the day. How many days? Tommy pressed. How many days has it been since the last customer? A while. A while, Sally answered. The door flew open, and the bell gave its digital ring that petered out at the end. Sally walked toward her station on grinding knees as the woman in her suit with no helmet or gloves in sight stumbled and collapsed on the tile. Sally said, How many in your party let's say Tommy and Randall both pushed past Sally. Alright, let me name this other character Haley. They helped her up and led her to a chair at the end of their long table. Sally tore free another ruined menu and brought it to the trio of humans. Randall gave Haley a cold sip from his glass. As he pulled it away, she seized it and set down the menu. Sally set down the menu and asked, "What can we start you with?" Where have you been? Tommy asked. She answered, "We couldn't get your pods open. There was a signal and we went for help. You and Stephanie?" Randall asked. "Do you want to hear the specials?" Sally asked. Okay. "Yes," Haley said. Yes, Haley said. "We lost the signal and started back, but then got separated. I don't know how. Have you seen her?" Sally said, "On special today, we have catfish with potatoes. We have a big burger with mushrooms and barbecue sauce. We have Tommy shouted, "Stop with the specials, please. I'll give you a minute." Sally said, as she started away. "What signal did you hear? What signal did you pick up?" Tommy asked. "We got nothing when our pods opened. We didn't know where either of you were." Okay. Aunt Servo burst forth from the kitchen. "Jeff is cooking up a storm. Should be ready real soon. Can I get you boys refills?" No. No, Tommy said as Randall cried out. Yes. Refills and one more glass of ice water. We have more company, I see, Aunt Servo said. Does your friend know what she wants? Why didn't you wait? Okay, hold on. What would he ask next? How far from the ship did you go? Tommy asked. Miles, she said. Maybe 20 miles before we lost the signal. We searched a while and then, alright, I need to fix this. We searched for a while and then headed back. That's when, I don't know, we just lost each other. I'm not sure how it happened. Can I have more water? Sally moved from her station toward the kitchen. Randall picked up Tommy's untouched glass and helped Haley take another drink. Take it slow or you'll get sick. I got the waters. Aunt Servo waved Sally off. Did you read them the specials? Sally looked back and forth. I started, but then they declined. Aunt Servo gave an electronic sigh and called out a little louder. You want me to put on a third, you want me to put on a third meat and vegetable for your friend? Yes, Randall called, and Lots more water, please. Coming right up. Cousin Cog met her at the door, and the two robots conversed. Another voice shouted something in an echo from the kitchen. All right, Cousin Cog. All right. 20 miles, Tommy said. Why did you ever go that far in one day? Why did you ever try to go that far? All right. Haley looked up at Tommy and shook her head. I think I messed up names here a little while ago, but I'll fix that in the editing. Haley looked up at Tommy and shook her head. It's been 11 days since we touched down. How long ago did you guys wake up from deep sleep? Randall looked at his wrist, even though there was no watch there. Maybe a few hours. What signal were you following? Tommy asked. Aunt Servo turned from the kitchen. Jeff wants to know if you want everything out at the same time. Aunt Servo turned from the kitchen. Jeff wants to know if you want everything out at the same time. Randall called out. Hold on. Randall called out. No, just bring it when it's ready. Okay, let me do a little thing there. As soon as it's ready. Why are you still ordering food? Tommy growled from between his teeth. I could eat, Haley said. I'm starving. See? Randall said. Coming right up then. Aunt Servo re-entered kitchen with Cousin Cog. Sally leaned forward a little. Sally leaned forward a little. Is there anything I can get you as you wait? Tommy knelt down beside Haley. I think I'm spelling Hallie, but that's all right. Next to Haley. Focus for me, please. What signal did you and Stephanie pick up while we were still under? A tracking signal, she said. It was the rally signal. Who sent it? Randall asked. Okay. Aunt Servo came out balancing 3 fresh glasses of ice water. Sally helped her put them out as Aunt Servo left with the 2 empties. Randall reached for Haley's glass, but she grabbed it first and drank half of it at a go. I don't know who sent it. We never found them. She said finally. I don't know who sent them. We never found them, she said finally. Okay. Okay, let's get focused. All right. So, explain who sent it. I want this to be Tommy. Okay, who sent it? Tommy asked. That was Tom. Yeah, let's keep this Randall. Sorry. I'm not sure where this story's going, but we need to close it off pretty soon here. I don't know who sent it. We never found them, she said finally. So explain what happened right before Stephanie disappeared. She didn't disappear. We just got separated. past. He's asking you to explain what happened before you lost her. You saw her one moment, and the next you didn't. It's hard to explain, she said. Try, Tommy demanded. Aunt Servo and Cousin Cog swept out of the kitchen. The back of a burly robot showed where more meat and vegetables cooked on the grill. Servo and Cog. Alright, Servo and Cog laid out the two completed meals and returned to the kitchen. Aunt Servo called over her shoulder. Aunt Servo called over her shoulder, the third helping will be out shortly. Let's say Haley pushed Tommy aside and sprung out of her chair. She tore off a piece of the gray meat and stuffed it, a piece of the gray meat from Tommy's plate and stuffed it into her mouth. She chased it with her water and then gobbled some more. Randall tried his meat and then sniffed at the vegetables. He took a nibble and then a bigger bite. Not potatoes or carrots, not a parsnip, some kind of root vegetable. It's good though. Try one, Tommy. See if you know what it is. I'm not trying one. We need to track down Stephanie. We need to track down Stephanie. How far away did you last see her? How far away did you last see her? Randall turned around in his seat. What kind of meat and vegetable is this, dear? Sally jolted and said, We locally sourced it. He stared a moment and went back to eating. Haley paused between handfuls. Haley paused between handfuls and spoke as she chewed. Probably 10 miles out, give or take. We were on our way back. I searched in a spiral for a few hours and then decided to see if she came back from the ship. Randall covered his mouth as he spoke. Randall covered his mouth as he spoke. How did you find us in here? The light was on, she said. The light was on, she said. We missed this place the first time. Your tracks from the ship hadn't quite been covered. Then I picked up your signals a few feet from the door. We need to go look for her, Tommy said. Could you find the last place you saw her? Haley paused and looked up at the spinning ceiling fans before she spoke. All right. I think so. I know so. We were at some arena, deserted like the rest of the city. None of this was built when we first set out to deep space. There was a time dilation. Okay, let me fix that. There was a time dilation. Tommy mumbled over a mouthful. We don't know how much. Maybe 5 or 600 years if the hostess robot is right. What about the arena? What about the arena? Tommy asked. No, not. See, again, I'm messing up the names. I'm sorry. This is Randall. Randall's eating. Tommy's not eating anything. I may have to do an edit off screen just to get the names right. That might be fun to do next time, is to just make sure I'm getting the names right. What about the arena? Tommy asked. We thought we saw something. Something alive? Tommy asked. Haley shrugged. I've been reading some stuff recently about people that get very upset when characters shrug or nod too much. I'm going to have her shrug anyway, though. Haley shrugged. Not sure. Just something. We thought we got a bit of a signal. Thought it was one of yours, but it was there and gone fast. What happened at the arena? What happened at the arena? Tommy asked. Haley had finished her water and started on Tommy's fresh glass. Okay. Good evening. Thanks for being here, man. All right. Haley had finished her water and started on Tommy's fresh glass. There was a shifting. Nothing fell, but the whole place was shaking. We fled out through some exits. There was a gate in our way, and we had to detour. It was dark, but we saw light ahead. Something flashed in the tunnel, and Stephanie, how are you doing? I'm doing good, thank you, man. Just writing a little sci-fi story here. I think we're getting close to the ending. Something flashed in the tunnel, and Stephanie yelled for me to keep going. Did she make it out? whispered, "If you have time to lean, you have time to clean." Randall gave a chuckle. Haley said, "I'm sure she did. I saw her in the light. There was a lot of dust, and the ground was still shaking, but she yelled again for me to run. When the dust cleared, she was gone, but there was some other object still moving. I had to run to stay ahead of it." Alright. Was it attacking you? Was it attacking you? Randall wiped his mouth on his sleeve. I didn't wait to see. I lost track of Stephanie by that point. Once I shook off, come on now, let's spell these things correctly. Once I shook off the thing tracking me, let's say machine. Once I shook off the machine tracking me, I started searching. I even went into the arena again. It's a maze down there, but I didn't find her, and she never answered my calls. All right. The kitchen doors swung open. This time, Aunt Servo brought the third plate, very much like the other two. This time, Aunt Servo brought the third plate very much like the other two. A bigger robot on treads instead of legs stood in the swing door. The grill was quiet again. "Must be Jeff," Randall said. Haley turned. She started to choke. As Tommy reached for her, She bolted for the door and ran back outside into the blowing dust. Tommy ran outside after her, calling her name. Sally took a moment to close the door before she met eyes with Randall still in his seat. He shrugged and returned to eating as the third plate was set down steaming. Anything else? Let's say anything else, honey? Aunt Servo asked. Could you refill all the waters, please? Randall asked. They should be right back. Sure thing. Aunt Servo took the empties with her. Jeff spoke as he rolled backward into the kitchen. I'm going shopping again. I'll be right back. Hurry. Hurry, Aunt Servo said. We're having quite a crowd today. Need to keep them fed, Jeff said, as he rolled toward the back door. Okay. All right, sure thing. You took the empties. All right. I'm going to put a conversation in between here to kind of fill out the story just a touch. Tommy paused. Not Tommy. Good Lord, man. Get your character straight. Randall paused and belched. He asked, what happened to all the people? Your friends just left suddenly, Sally answered. No, I mean all the people on the planet. Where did they go? Jeff spoke as he rolled backward into the kitchen. I'm going shopping again. I'll be right back. All right. Sally jolted and then said, Sally jolted, stood up a little straighter. Can't Servo said, let's say to Jeff here. That way I'll pick back up on that part without a problem. Sally jolted and stood up a little straighter. They went underground at first. Underground? Why? Hold on, I gotta... They went underground at first. Underground, why? To hide from the robots. I need to have a point where she offers to get them more silverware, but I'll need to add that in with the to hide from the robots. I forgot to give you silverware. Hold on. No, wait. She waited. Why did they hide from the robots? There was an uprising. But the humans won, and the robots obeyed again. All right, there we go. Almost got this closed up. All right, there was an uprising, but the humans won, and the robots obeyed again. Hurry, Aunt Servo said to Jeff. We're having quite a crowd today. Tommy took a swallow of... No, he wouldn't have any water. Tommy reached for his water, but it wasn't there. He said, so what happened to the winning humans? Let's see, they killed themselves off just like the robots predicted they would. Let me get you that silverware now. Oh God, it's not Tommy, it's Randall. Good grief. Someone else should be writing this story. I can't keep the character straight. Randall, okay. Randall shrugged. No, we're not going to have him shrug again. Randall shook his head, but returned to eating the gray meat and vegetables anyway. All right. So there we have it. There's some ambiguity about what happened in that story. Sally reveals a good bit at the end about what happened, but doesn't really close all the loose ends, and there's some stuff left open for interpretation about what actually took place in that restaurant. It's definitely going to benefit from some edits, but we'll set that as story aside for now. For our editing block today, we're going to look at the Happy Pumpkin. Nice adding at the end, made it stronger, I think. Thank you, Armand. I appreciate that. You never can tell what you're doing with a story that's going to make it better or worse, I think. But I think that helps out. It still kind of keeps the humor there a little bit, I think, too. Dark humor, anyway. All right, so this is the Happy Pumpkin. Speaking of dark humor, we're going to take a look at this for the editing block. Unlike regular reading, anytime I find something that's not correct, I'm going to make changes. Some of those may be story changes, but then some of them may actually be just grammar issues. I'd have plenty of those as I'm going through. All right, so this is the first edit of The Happy Pumpkin by J. Wilburn. As Halloween approached, the candy vanished from the shelves. Kids took advantage of bags being out. Well-meaning parents bought candy early, but had to buy again before Halloween. Candy sitting around is just too tempting, probably exactly why the stores put it out early. The good people of the town of Butcher Falls were not the only creatures interested in the candy. Let's say this time of year. All right, that's a great line. That's going to be the difference between a Pulitzer Prize or not. All right, a little green vine snaked out from under the edge of a shelf between shoppers at the local drugstore. If anyone had checked the security cameras recording that evening before the footage was dumped, they would have seen that vine grabbing a mini pack of Twizzlers, bags of circus peanuts, and fun-sized candy bars, but no one checked. The Walmart's broad candy aisle was picked over by vines in the wee hours of the morning. Tired stock boys rolled out pallets on jacks and added to the shelves in zombie-like trances. They stuffed extra items behind the things on display like they weren't supposed to do. They also missed the vines slipping away with candy. All right. That's fine. Troy rested his elbow on the grimy convenience store's counter and his pimpled cheeks upon his sweaty hands. The vine pushed through a break in a vent and moved to the middle aisle, where it sensed the rich, sugary aromas. Plastic crinkled as the vine helped itself. A scrape across the floor brought Troy's head up in a startled snap. He looked to both doors first, then in the direction of the bathrooms. Cameras showed all pumps empty. Let's say camera monitors next to him. Camera monitors next to him showed all pumps empty. Then the scraping sound came again. He let out a wavering sigh and stood up a little straighter, but still had to duck to see out from under the plastic cigarette ad above the counter. Checking the rounded windows, he saw nothing. The only sound was the throbbing rhythm of the cooler motors, that were well beyond the point of needing regular scheduled maintenance. All right. That the sound lulled him back onto his elbows, and the scraping noise of candy pulling through a broken vent did not wake him this time. Through a broken vent, a minute later, did not wake him this time. Okay. These unnatural thefts of candy increased as the night of Halloween drew closer. As darkness thickened over Butcher Falls on the 31st, the pumpkin pulled itself out from under the crawl space below the abandoned house at 115 Elder Drive. The place had been empty for years, but somehow the power was still on, at least with the porch lights that shine bright and inviting this evening. No one had been inside in months, not even the agents of the bank that had recently acquired the property from yet another bank that had failed to sell it, again. All right, good deal. Distressed properties were sometimes difficult to unload. Butcher Falls had some nice neighborhoods. Elder Drive was about average middle class with nice families and a safe school, but not a particularly impressive one. Not a particularly impressive one in sports, let's say in academics or sports. Everyone knew the story of the Campbell family vanishing from 115 Elder Drive. The rumors grew over the years, and there were not a lot of house flippers in Butcher Falls, so the banks sort of passed the property around. If anyone did venture inside, it would look and smell old and musty. Though there had been no treatments, the place was rodent and vermin free, maybe more than the houses occupied by families all around. I'll say maybe more so than the... All right, that's better. The Happy Pumpkin had to eat something between holidays. All right. The pumpkin was careful not to be seen. It always was. As it searched up and down Elder with its empty but glowing triangular eyes, it saw the street was clear for now. It needed to hurry, though. Pumpkin used his vines to set out plastic bowls. Let's say used its vines and leafy fingers. Because I think I want to use that later, and it'll be good to introduce it now. All right. Used its vines and leafy fingers to set up the plastic bowls with the best candy it had gathered and stored under the house. No circus peanuts or chalky generic candy tonight. Only the best stuff for Halloween. Pumpkin had also discovered that parents and children were wary of loose open candy. Everything had to be in its own wrapper in order to lure them in. It had not always been that way in the past, but Pumpkin had to adapt and evolve in order to survive. Everything that wanted to eat, everything that wanted to live had to eat. Pumpkin sniffed the air with its single triangle nostril. The children were getting closer. More of them were coming outside in their little costumes, like individually wrapped treats, each to their own. He took the moment to straighten a few decorations that had been left in the attic after the Campbell family was devoured. The scarecrows were getting a little ragged. Yeah, I'm going to leave that in. I use the word ragged a little too many times, so we'll see if I need to change that. The scarecrows were getting a little ragged, but they still looked fine along the porch. He used an old lighter to light up a few candles, and then he positioned himself near the candy, but over beside the iron railing. He looked just like a fresh jack-o'-lantern himself if he held very still and no one got too close. Of course, if they got too close, wrong kind of two, homophone mistakes make me feel the dumbest, so I always try to find those. If they got too close, there wouldn't be much left of them to tell anyone else. He opened his mouth in a wide, mad grin. As long as he didn't show too much of his sharp teeth, it worked fine. Even though he had no candle in his hollow core, he still lit up with a flickering light. As the night went on, he would get brighter with his excitement and anticipation. The first parents walked up the stained drive and over the brick steps to the tempting candy. The little kids looked and smelled delicious, but they were with their parents. Pumpkin would eat up the little ones fast, but some of the parents might get away. That would be a problem to his survival, so he had to be patient. The little kids mostly had parents and mostly came out early, so bigger treats. Let's say some. I got a missing word there. So some bigger treats. Oh my goodness, would be out alone later. All right, I just had it worded differently, but that's fine. I'll just leave it like that now. As the little ones tapered off, Pumpkin watched one more baby dressed as a pumpkin herself retreat from the house in her parents' arms. Pumpkin licked his orange lips with a stringy yellow tongue that scratched like drying pulp. His time would come. The first teens made their way up the drive. It was a group of 5. No parents, but 5 was a lot to take down with the street busy. He thought he might be able to do it if he was quick. A couple of the teens held back, though. "I don't like this place," one said. "Yeah, no one lives here. This stuff could be poisoned." A bigger teen with his jean-clad legs so close to Pumpkin's mouth, so very close to Pumpkin's mouth, said, "All of that is just urban legend. I don't mean some some creeper, one of the teens out of reach on the lawn said. I mean some kid from school who hates everyone who could have covered that stuff in bleach. No one lives here, dude. Why is there candy? That gave everyone pause. Pumpkin desperately wanted those last two to climb up on the porch so he could have a shot to bring them all down. Get out here. Get out here. Get out here, one of the boys on the porch laughed. Let's split it up. That's not... No, maybe he's yelling at them. Get out of here, one of the boys on the porch laughed. Let's split all of it up. No, that's not how he would say it. Let's split it all up. That sounds more natural. All right. Not with those two babies on the lawn. Take whatever you want. I'm out. It was nice knowing you. All right, got a missing word. All right. We would smell bleach. There is no bleach. Could be laxative. Another pause, but then the retort came. Everything's wrapped up. Stop being stupid. One of them picked up the entire bowl to dump into his pillowcase. The teens didn't even bother with costumes. Only take one or two, the pumpkin roared. The bowl dropped back onto the little table. A few pieces of candy dumped onto the brick steps. The teens looked around and then focused on the doors. Someone's here. No one's here. That's a speaker. A speaker that tells you not to steal candy as you're stealing candy. If the guy has something to say, let him come out here. Otherwise, I'm taking it all. The pumpkin decided. All right, let me make this past tense. The pumpkin decided he was going to bite straight through the biggest teen's ankle. Whatever the consequences, this was it. Then a parent called from the driveway. You leaving any for us? Only taking two like the sign says, the big kid called back. There was no sign, actually. Not all the teens took one or two before they left. The parents laughed about it together as their kids took three each. The teens, parents, and kids slipped away alive and well. During the lull, the pumpkin relaxed its cramping mouth and used its vines to put back the spilled pieces of candy into the bowls. If this night went much longer, he'd have to drag out more candy from under the house. One flat piece of candy had a shoe print on it. Pumpkin tossed that piece into the bushes. Maybe it would lure out a mouse or some house cat for later. Pumpkin would be disappointed if that was all he got to eat on Halloween. The night dragged on, but everyone was in groups, and Pumpkin decided not to risk it. Eventually, porch lights winked out, up and down. Up and down Elder Drive. Voices rose from over fences and backyards, but traffic for candy dropped off. Pumpkin's mad grin melted into a toothless frown. Then it happened. One lone kid, younger than the teens from earlier, made his way up the dark drive. Pumpkin held very still. If he dared to smile, the kid might notice and run. He was all alone. He was wearing an all-black costume. It was some superhero thing Pumpkin did not recognize. Too young to be out here alone. Too dark to wear that costume without a flashlight. Too late to still be trick-or-treating. Pumpkin didn't care. He held very still and waited as the boy took the brick steps one at a time. This was it. This was finally it. Voices rose again and the boy froze. Pumpkin could wrap the kid up in vines easily. Even if he got twisted up in the railing, he could put the kid out and feast at his leisure. He waited, though. No hurry. If the boy decided to bolt, Pumpkin could just snag an ankle. All right, let me fix a typo there. Could snag an ankle and take him out in the yard without anyone to see. The voices drew louder and closer. Those were not parents partying behind fences. Dark figures approached from the street. He needed to grab up his little treat now or never. Then one of the voices was familiar. The tall teen, in his jeans and no costume, had traded his pillowcase for a baseball bat. That distraction of recognizing the big boy was all the little kid needed. The little boy sprang into motion. Pumpkin lurched out with his vines, but the boy ran sideways instead of down the walk. By the time Pumpkin adjusted and his vines thrummed through the railing, the boy had broken through the unkempt hedges in the side yard and was gone. The big boy with the bat and two of his friends from earlier approached. The other two carried toilet paper. The two cautious teens who had stayed in the yard and probably saved these three earlier, let's say earlier in the night. Yeah, earlier in, no, that's not the right place. Earlier in the night were not with the group for this trick. All right, save these three in the treat. Earlier in the treat portion of the night, or not with the group for this trick portion. For this trick portion of the night. I may need to take out one of the nights, but I like the idea there. Pumpkin rolled his triangle eyes without much effort to hide the motion. One with toilet paper broke the plastic around the pack. Missing word. And started unrolling a tail in order to throw the stuff up into the trees. The other kept his pack of bath tissue under his arm as he mounted the steps and dug through the picked over candy bowls. Pumpkin licked his mouth with the pulpy tongue again, but waited for the others to get closer. Only two, the boy with the bat said as he kept his distance this time. They all laughed. I'm going to put that in italics, even though it's in quotations, so that kind of makes it sound sarcastic. The boy opened candy and dropped the wrappers back into the bowl as he ate one after the other. Through his gooey full mouth he mumbled, "All the good stuff is gone anyway." "Ain't that always the way?" the big boy said as he swung his bat between two dead bushes and shattered a bedroom window just above his head. The glass exploded like a bomb. The kid eating candy dropped his unopened package, let's say, of toilet paper, and choked on the chocolate in his throat. The boy preparing to throw a roll into the tree fumbled it, and Pumpkin smelled the rich stink of urine from his direction. All right. What are you doing?" the boy who peed himself cried in a harsh whisper. "Why did you think I brought the bat, dummy?" As the pea-smelling boy in the yard pondered that, the kid on the porch held his throat with both hands and dropped to his knees. Change that to a comma, heaving silently. The big boy took the silence as an invitation. Took the silence from both his friends as an invitation and smashed out the next window over. "Someone will hear," the boy who wasn't choking to death said. Vines wrapped around the dying kid and squeezed. "I'll do what I want. No one cares about this house. They'll care if we get caught. We won't get caught if you two can keep your mouths shut." As the vines squeezed, the boy slumping on the porch coughed up a solid piece of candy. He sucked in air with a, let's say, desperate instead of ragged. Desperate, wet gulp. Vines and leafy fingers wrapped around his throat. Let's say his cleared throat. All right, good enough. "Are you crying about it?" the boy with the bat asked without looking. He was circling to check for windows in the side yard, but those were too high unless he wanted to throw rocks, which wasn't out of the question. Let's say it wasn't out of the question tonight. "Are you okay?" the boy in the yard asked a second before Pumpkin bit through the gasping kid's skull in a splash of red and gray. The boy in the yard peed himself again and tried to yell in terror, but his throat locked up on him at the worst time. Without wasting time finishing his first treat, Pumpkin launched himself from the top of the steps in the air to the second boy's face. That kid finally got off one small shriek, but the noise cut off quickly. I want to do one more thing up here. Let's say the Harry leaves around the dying kid's throat let's say started to leave an angry rash. Okay. Sounds like he's allergic then. Okay. Without wasting time, launched himself. The big boy with the bat didn't even hear it as he returned to the front of the house. Are we doing this or what? That was the last thing any of those three boys ever said. He approached his friend on the ground without further comment. His mind wouldn't wrap around what was happening. It was like a poisonous piece of unwrapped candy in his mind. The problem was the missing face. He kept looking for his friend's face before he spoke. No, that was not before he spoke. Let me take that out. That's just confusing. But never saw it because it was no longer there. Vines cut off his breathing. As well. He swung the bat wild as he staggered. The pumpkin seized and snapped both the last boy's wrists. Big boy opened his mouth to scream as the bat fell to the brown grass, but no air could pass through his closed throat. Pumpkin bit through both ankles as he had planned earlier and brought Big Boy to the ground. Now he could take his time eating this great big treat while it was still warm. Let's say take his time unwrapping and eating. By morning, people were looking for the three boys. By evening, they were looking in earnest with the help of the police. Most kids on Elder Drive and throughout Butcher Falls didn't care for those three, let's say, all that much. But everyone has parents, and these boys' parents still love them very much. Let's just say anyway instead of very much. Love them anyway. No one thought to look at 115 Elder. No reason to think the boys were there. All the candy and decorations were gone. The toilet paper and bat were stuffed. All right, I need to put an ED on here. Were stuffed deep under the house. Plywood had been boarded over the two broken windows, and no one quite remembered it hadn't always been that way. On November 3rd, a representative from the bank took an officer through the house at 115 without any fuss. There was no indication of wrongdoing there. You think you'll find those kids? We hope they are just out camping or raising hell somewhere and will be home soon. Do you think that's it? Don't know. Thank you for letting me check. You guys ever selling this eyesore? The bank man snorted with no real humor. This place is cursed, at least from a real estate standpoint. Do you want it? The officer shook his head and stepped out. You should fix those windows. Otherwise, I'll put a comma there. Otherwise, more kids will mess with this place. That's bad for all of us. That's not my department, sir, but I'll look into it. He had no intention of looking into it. As the bank man prepared to close the door, he heard a scraping noise. He paused and listened for a couple seconds. Hearing nothing, he locked up 115 Elder Drive for another year. This was someone else's territory and problem. No, let me do it. I'll do some parallel here. Someone else's territory and someone else's problem. Okay. So that is The Happy Pumpkin. I am pretty pleased with that one. I think it's dark. I think it has some subtle humor to it. And I very much like how it turned out. All right, so let's look at our last story for today. Okay. I've worked on this one for a little while, and my hope is that it's in its final draft form right at about 3,700 words. Abbott Park. I What I like about this story is that nothing supernatural happens in it. The fear is, I think the fear is good. It's fear from a kid's standpoint, and I think the story uh, touches on the idea that oftentimes kids feel very alone in their fear. The idea that many of the things they face, adults just either aren't in a position to help them with, or just ignore that help is needed. It's kind of one of those ideas that we sometimes feel like kids just need to make their own way in the world and learn things the hard way. But for some kids, especially those who might have trouble in situations like that, it makes them feel like they're facing the terrors of the world alone. And of course, as you get older, sometimes some of those terrors stick with you. So let's see how good of a job I did portraying all that in this story. This is Abbott Park by J. Wilburn. Tim Nestor had never gone home on his own. He used to ride the bus, but there were kids on there who picked on him. Some days Dad could drive him to school and Mom would pick him up later. Tim's older brother Alex was fine riding the bus. There was a long conversation at home about why Alex couldn't keep Tim safe from the bullies. Alex said it wasn't that simple. Mom and Dad weren't satisfied with that answer, but Tim got it. Alex eventually could brush the other kids off of his brother, but he couldn't fight everyone. It was complicated. Dad decided it was simple enough. Alex could walk to school with his brother and walk him home on the days Mom and Dad couldn't get him there or pick him up. Alex didn't like it much, but he accepted it on the days he had to babysit Tim to and from. To Alex's credit, he never took it out on his brother. Today was Alex's day. Tim thought it was, but as the afternoon drew on and the school cleared out, he wasn't sure of anything. The office was closed, and this was before kids carried phones. He couldn't call Mom or Dad to see if they had forgotten. He couldn't call home to see if Alex forgot. He had his bike, which usually meant Alex's day, but not always. Sometimes he stuffed his bike into the back of one of the cars for the drive home. Whose day was it? Tim hated thinking of himself like a chore, like taking out the trash. Someone, everyone, had forgotten to bring in the Tim Nestor garbage. His shadow grew long and finally touched the brick at the base of the school's front wall. He hoped one of them would realize he was missing and come get him. It was a cold day to top everything off, and clouds took out the sun and his long shadow. The darkness grew heavy and gray. He knew if he waited long enough, someone would have to come. He also knew his brother would be in trouble, and though he wouldn't take it out on his little brother, Tim didn't want to give Alex another reason to see him as a burden instead of a pal. Tim didn't like being the trash that needed attending. If he was going to go home on his own for the first time ever, he should have left much sooner. Lost my place, I'm sorry. The sun had still been out. The afternoon was still new. People were still around, but he had no way of knowing this would be the day he was forgotten until much later. As he closed his puffy orange coat around himself and unlocked his red bicycle from the rack, he found himself wishing he had just faced the teasing and torment of the bus ride home. It was hard to move his arms in that big coat, but he wrestled his bike lock into his backpack, already overstuffed with books, a trapper keeper, and a ton of homework he was already late starting. The last boy mounted the last bike and started the first wobbly revolutions of his solo ride home from school. His first solo ride home from school. Other kids his age went home on their own already, but they left at the same time as everyone else. Crossing guards watched them the first few blocks. A cop usually sat in his car on the main street leading deeper into the city, the opposite direction Tim was pedaling now. People were walking with their parents were walking with some kids, and even the ones walking alone were sort of in the midst of every other kid walking alone too. As the school slowly rolled back behind Tim's stretched pack and puffy coat, he rode truly alone. Even shops were closing up at this point. A few cars blew by with swirls of lukewarm exhaust, and every few of those already had their headlights on. It could just be because of the clouds, told himself, but he knew it wasn't just that. This was a bad hour to start out a bike ride home, he knew. It was a kid snatching hour and would only get darker and worse the longer he took. Tim tried to pick up speed, but he couldn't really maintain going much faster than he already was. He kept a steady pace except when he crossed streets, but the sun continued its unrelenting pace to the edge of the world. For a moment, it was just a quick moment, Tim let out a thick, wet sob from deep in his throat, maybe down in his aching chest just above his fluttering stomach. It was a bitter, hitching sob of a scared child about to go into hysterics. He kept pedaling and bit down on that sadness until his cheeks hurt, and the tears still leaked slowly from the pain and self-hating anger. These were the kind of tears he fought back when the kids ganged up on him in the bus. Those moments he waited for Alex to finally say, "That's enough, guys," like it was all some big joke. Sometimes they did let up, and other times the poking, the teasing, and the torture continued. Tim had grown to realize there was no kind of tears, no kind of reaction that made it all stop. People were kind most of the time, but when they were cruel or indifferent, no amount of tears changed them. Adults ignored kids. They walked past crying kids. They turned their heads when kids were picking on another crying kid in the street or in a park. Tim had his arm twisted up behind his back one time, and a couple stared for a moment before deciding to go on and not get involved. Tim was on his own now, but he was always on his own with his scared and hurt tears all along. He finally reached the cross street that opened into the walkway leading into Abbott Park. Tim had seen pictures of Central Park way up in New York. Dad said Abbott Park was nowhere near that big, but it looked that big to Tim. In another way, it looked bigger. Tim had seen pictures of logging roads through thick, untamed forest. Much of Abbott Park looked that way to him from the inside. Old trees, untouched by an axe, leaned over the walkways through parts of the park, swallowing everything in shadows even when the sun was shining. The sun wasn't shining, the day wasn't new, and Abbott Park looked endless from out here, like the terrible woods in The Hobbit, which Tim enjoyed reading in the safety of his own warm bedroom. Unfortunately, his house was on the opposite side. Riding his bike next to his big brother as Alex walked or jogged along in the mornings was quite pleasant. Even in the afternoon on the way back, it wasn't any big deal, but it was a very big deal now. He could go around the outside. There were sidewalks most of the way around, but not all the way. He'd be in the street, and it would be real dark by the time he finished that long detour. He had to go through. Tim shivered from the cold, even inside his big coat, but it wasn't all because of the cold. The longer I wait, Tim's voice shook in a way that brought shame. He already felt his share of it from all the crying. Tim kicked off and crossed the street. He was already on the other side before he remembered he had failed to look both ways. There was no traffic, but his folks would kill him anyway if they knew. He had other danger to deal with, so he pedaled on into the deep shadows of the first brick path into Abbott Park. Every motion from both sides sent his head whipping at one way or the other to try to see what was coming at him on this lonely path. His hood made it difficult to see from the sides. He pulled it back, but the coat was so puffy that it kept riding back up onto his head. He was just seeing things, he told himself, not real things, just scared little kid imaginings. Everything looked to be in motion because he was in motion. The brick trail gave way to dirt. He knew from countless passages back and forth through here that this was supposed to happen, but it still felt like it was wrong. The trail was too narrow, the trees were too close on both sides, the signs and trash cans were wrong. There was a maze of trails through here, and he had taken the wrong turn, he was sure, even though there were no turns yet. He could go back now. He'd get back out of the park at the end of the main road if he didn't keep going and get himself more lost. But that sort of logic that most panicked kids could not reach in their moments of need. No, the drive to keep going, to keep running forward, was always imperative. Tim didn't know it, but many adults suffered the same problem when they were lost. He emerged into a wider dirt road where the trees broke open above a broad cross of an intersection between paths. This was the right way. Tim couldn't figure out why it looked so wrong before. The cross trail ended on both sides of the main trail, not far in either direction. There were other trails that led to creeks and ponds both ways. Even in the cold, this place had a swampy smell of active decay that Tim always associated with heat and humidity. It was the stench of trapped moisture. It was the odor of dead leaves caked together and turning black. 3 blue vehicles sat parked. They weren't the same models, but they were all sport utility vehicles in all the same shade of blue. One was parked crooked down one way, and the other 2 were parked together down the other. No one was around. A lost kid, a desperate kid, would be justified in seeking help from adults, but this felt like a trap. There was no reason to think that way, other than the stranger danger mantras imprinted on his young mind. But the color bothered him too. People trying to hurt him wouldn't necessarily all drive the same color vehicles, but he took it as a warning from the universe. Tim heard voices down one way and crunching footsteps from the other. He leaned forward, tilted his head down, and pedaled as fast and as hard as he could between the blue strangers. He was an orange and red shape, speeding off through Abbott Park alone. Concrete paths picked up where the dirt gave out, just like they had every other time he had made this trip home from school with his big brother. But Alex wasn't here, so even though he knew the concrete paths were next and were right, they felt wrong. He did not stop. He did not slow. He just kept going. A section of swings came up on the left. Mothers gathered their young children for the trek home themselves. This seemed late for families to be out. Tim supposed he was sometimes out with his family, sometimes out this late with his own family, but he was alone and the clouds made it feel later. Was it before dinner or after? It had to be before, otherwise his family would be looking for him. Maybe they were looking. Maybe they were at school and yelling at Alex because Tim was gone along with his red bike. He thought about asking some of the mothers for help. Even if they didn't want to help, even if they were in a hurry, they would have to help. Mothers always helped when asked because they would want their own kids helped too. There were a few men here too, though. The women weren't scared, so those had to be trusted husbands, fathers, or boyfriends. Still, all the men wore blue coats. Tim knew he was being crazy with fear, but all those cars had been blue, and now the coats were blue. It felt like a warning. Warnings were there for a reason. Tim left the patch of playground equipment behind as he kept pondering his choices. Even if he did seek help, they would ask where he lived. He'd have to point down this middle path and say that his home was right on the other side of the park, a park not even close to as big as Central Park. The parents of the other kids would just stare at him and say, "Well, keep going and you'll get there, kid, right?" Besides, they were already cleared out now. Tim was riding alone again. The path wound one way and then the other. Tim concentrated until his head hurt to be sure he stayed on the right path. Every move felt wrong, but his muscles told him this was the right way. Why was it taking forever then? He was on his bike. He was getting tired and slowing down, especially on the uphills, but he was riding faster than he did with his brother. Since he didn't have to match pace with his walking brother, he could go as fast as his turning feet would take him on his red bike. Fear was a good motivator to keep those pedals turning. Still, it seemed to be taking forever to get through this park. He heard footsteps, pounding, running toward him. It took everything in him not to pee himself or fall right off the bike and faint. He spotted the woman jogging toward him up a bricked incline from under one of the arching walking bridges. She was an adult, but still younger than his parents. She could be high school age, but probably college or older. Tim was never that great at judging how old adults really were. She was pretty, though, beautiful, really. She showed skin and looked sweaty even though it was a cold day. Her tight running clothes were blue, and so were her running shoes. Blue was Tim's new color of fear, but she was a woman, and she might help a scared little boy. Maybe she would run beside him the rest of the way home. She met eyes with Tim where he peeked out sideways over the edge of his annoying hood. Then she turned around. The turn was casual, but she ran back under the bridge and away faster than she had been approaching. Tim stopped pedaling and coasted a while as he watched her go. She could have been planning to turn around anyway. It was getting late and she needed to get home too. Still, it didn't feel like that. When she met eyes with Tim, he recognized fear mirrored there. If kids had reason to fear being attacked, maybe girls had reason to be afraid even when they got older. Places like Abbott Park might hold terror for more people than Tim had thought. She was afraid of me. His words didn't shake this time, but he heard puzzled wonder in his own voice. He was no threat to anyone. He was only here because he couldn't even ride his own school bus home without getting picked on. But she didn't know that any more than he knew which adults were helpful and which were strangers he was always warned about. The realization of her fear, the fact that fear of facing the world alone didn't leave you automatically as an adult, was terrifying to him on an existential level. He started to wonder if his dad felt fear like that. If dads could be afraid like this, was there anywhere in the world that you could be safe? God, why didn't one of you remember to bring me home from school? Tim stood up on his pedals and fought his way up another steep incline between himself and his house. He could walk his bike over some of these hills. He sometimes did that to and from school with the protection of his brother beside him. But he had no intention of setting a single foot down in this park. That felt like a dangerous blue choice. He was going to pedal all the way home before he considered resting. Does Alex sometimes feel this afraid? Tim wondered in horror. Maybe he doesn't stand up for me on the bus because he's afraid of the same things I am. With fear coursing through him like undirected electrical current, he pedaled harder on the downhill instead of just coasting with gravity. Electricity was sometimes blue too. The dead leaves gathering in spots near the trail had a dead, burnt smell that sometimes reminded him of fall and sometimes bothered him in a way and he couldn't explain. It was better than the swampy smell. On the next flat section, Tim steered through the wide curve as he passed a trash can on one side and a green bench on the other. The lamps along the path lit up a ghostly white. The empty and locked tennis courts behind their high black fences showed along the edges of this fresh spill of light. The lights. Why were the lights on already? He hoped it was the clouds, but he suspected it was too dark to be just that. He was pedaling through Abbott Park all alone at night. How had it become nighttime? Tim cried openly now as he hauled through one circle of light to another. The park looked deserted, but he felt eyes all around him. Finally, the ivy-colored archway appeared in front of him, with the shadowed street and the partially lit house beyond. His tears threatened to blur out the view, but he pressed onward. This was where it would happen, he thought. This is where he'd get snatched, right within view of his own house, just within sight of safety, because nowhere in the world was truly safe for anyone at any age. He saw figures. He saw motion. Hands reached for him out of the night dark blackness from those final patches of winter-brown foliage. Reaching. They grabbed for him on both sides. Men in blue coats. They would drag him to their blue vehicles that looked black at this hour. They would take him down unmarked trails to the edge of dark water. He already smelled the burnt dead leaf odor with the swampy decay of trapped moisture underneath. Then the real poking, teasing, and torture would begin, the kind of unspeakable stuff that would make the bus ride home seem like heaven in comparison. Tim flew through the arch, off the curb, and across the street without looking again. Even though there had been no blue monsters to grab him, he bumped up over the next curb. I'm going to correct that. I can't help myself. And raced. Did I do that right the first time? Yeah. And raced past the last few houses to his driveway. Still crying, he dropped his bike with a crash next to the bumper of his mother's car. He'd put it away safely soon, but first he needed to escape this darkness. He ran up the concrete steps 2 at a time, wrestled open the glass door, and like a horror movie, he couldn't get the knob of the front door to turn. He fought and cried and sniffled, but finally decided it was really locked. He pounded on the door with both fists, screamed for help, feeling something closing in behind him. He rang the doorbell over and over the way his dad hated, hoping to bring the man faster in his anger. Still nothing. The neighbors didn't even bother to look out to see what was happening. He turned around expecting to see men in blue, but in reality he was still entirely alone. Tim shifted out of his backpack straps and clawed at the pockets. His spare key wasn't where it was supposed to be. He searched every other pocket and all around his books. He returned to the proper pocket 3 times before he decided the key really wasn't there. Had he dropped it? Had someone borrowed it? He couldn't remember. Tim just sat down. His legs were watery and exhausted. Dad's car was gone. They were looking for him. Dad would go look. Mom would insist on coming. Alex would have to go because he fell down on his responsibility. Still, even Tim knew someone should have stayed home in case he showed up. They think I don't have the courage to come home by myself. Tim sighed and covered his face with both hands. Maybe he should go to one of the neighbors. But who was to say any of them might not be men in blue, people who had fooled even his parents? Who was to say any of them could keep Tim safe from anything in the darkness that wanted to hurt him? He lifted his bike lock and rubber-wrapped chain out of his pack and held it at the ready like a medieval weapon. He couldn't fight back against bullies his own age, though. What was he going to do if a real adult from the dark water came to snatch him? The rubber around the lock chain was blue. He wondered if the jogging woman had gotten home safe. He wondered if her parents still worried about her, even though she was grown. Tim just sat and waited for someone to come home and let him inside out of the cold of the night. He noticed for the first time that the front door of his house was painted blue. It was blue like the same blue sky everyone lived their fearful lives under. It was full dark now. All right. That crazy story is Abbott Park, and I hope it accomplishes what it's meant to. I guess ultimately being a good story or not. All right. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate those of you who came in at the beginning. I appreciate those of you who dropped in and those who showed up and stayed till the end. That means a lot. I very much enjoy creating these stories, and it's always so much more fun when people are on board and watching. So thanks again for being here. I'm not going to be on stream tomorrow because it's my son's birthday, but I'll be back on Monday to tell you another story. So thanks for being here. Look forward to talking to you again next time.